Hey everybody, this is Keith from the Mercer County Library System. Today we'll be continuing our journey through the world of Google Apps. In this video, I'll be talking specifically about Google Sheets. Google Sheets is the Google equivalent to Microsoft Excel. Both are spreadsheet programs that allow you to organize your data and perform calculations on that data. Now, if you're not familiar with either program, I encourage you to first watch my introductory video to Microsoft Excel. Though a lot of the images in that video are taken from Microsoft Excel, the terminology, tools, and interface between the two programs are nearly identical. So watching that video will give you a great crash course into spreadsheet programs in general. Now remember, in order to access Google Sheets, you first need to create a Gmail account. Once you've created that account, you simply sign in, visit google.com, come over here to the top right, go to the Apps menu, scroll down, and click on Sheets. So right now I'm looking at the Google Sheets homepage. Notice some of those Google controls we've already seen before. As I've just clicked on before, up here on the right we have the Apps menu, which gives us access to all the Google apps. Next over is the Google Account Access button, which allows you to manage your account, sign into a different Google account, or sign out altogether. In the middle here is a search bar that allows you to put in a general keyword search and search for a file saved in Google Sheets. And then on the top left corner, we have this menu that opens up once we click on it. And here we can access other Google apps, settings, help and feedback, and we can access our Google Drive, which remember is what's storing all of these different Google files. Now, throughout this demonstration, I will occasionally refer to Microsoft Excel because remember, Google Sheets is a Microsoft Excel equivalent. So in case you're already familiar with Excel, I'll just be pointing out some of the similarities between the two. On this initial screen, we see something similar to what we have seen when we launched Microsoft Office. Here we have a series of templates we can choose from for pre-built spreadsheet types, such as to-do lists, budgets, and calendars. Below, we have an area for our recent spreadsheets that we created. Now, as of right now, I have nothing created, so nothing's showing up. But once you do create a spreadsheet, it's going to show up in this area for quick access. But today we're going to be creating and formatting a spreadsheet from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and click on blank. Now what we're looking at here is a blank spreadsheet in Google Sheets. And if you've used Microsoft Excel before, you'll probably notice that this looks the exact same way. We have a grid style spreadsheet made up of vertical columns identified by letter and horizontal rows identified by number. And where those columns and rows intersect, each of those little rectangles is what we call a cell. And the cell that we're currently working on, the one that's highlighted, is called the active cell. And remember, whenever we're referring to a cell, we're referring to it by the cell reference. And by that I mean the column letter and the row number. So for example, this is the A1 cell, this is the A2 cell, B1, B2, so on and so forth. You simply click on a cell, you type into it, and that's how you enter data. Very simple. Now, one big difference here between Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel is the select cursor. Now, the select cursor is what we use to select a cell or a range of cells. So again, if you've used Microsoft Excel, you might remember the select cursor in Excel is that big white plus sign. And that's what we use to select a cell or a range of cells. In Google Sheets, the select cursor is actually just the arrow that you see here. Notice how I'm selecting a range of cells with that arrow. So instead of the big white plus sign, you're looking for the arrow. Now, one thing that's the same, however, is the autofill cursor. Remember that little box in the bottom right-hand corner is your autofill function. Once I point at it, I get that black plus sign, the same thing I get in Excel. And that's how we can copy and paste values into other cells. It's also how we can paste formulas into other cells, just like you see there. Let me just delete this for now. Now, another big difference between Excel and Sheets is this area up here, which is where we can select all the different tools and functions and formatting options that we can apply to our spreadsheet. Now, in Google Sheets here, we have a series of drop-down menus: File, Edit, View, Insert, Format, Data, Tools, Add-ons, and Help. Now, underneath of those drop-down menus is a static toolbar that holds all the frequently used tools in Google Sheets. So again, this toolbar stays here no matter what you click up here. It's a static toolbar. But as far as the tools and functions that Sheets offers, it pretty much has everything that Microsoft Excel does, just laid out in a slightly different format. So now I'll just briefly go through some of these menus up here. The File menu here holds those behind-the-scenes functions, such as creating a new spreadsheet, opening an existing spreadsheet, and that great download function that allows us to actually convert this Google Sheet, if we want, into a Microsoft Excel worksheet. We could also convert it into a PDF document. A couple more here are Move, which allows us to save this spreadsheet in a specific subfolder in our Google Drive. And also down here is where we can go to print our spreadsheet. Let me move over to Edit. Edit has some simple editing functions such as undo and redo, cut, copy, and paste. It's also a place where we can go to choose from a number of different delete options. We can delete single values, entire rows, or columns. In the View menu is where we can change the way the spreadsheet is displayed. And remember, anything under the View menu will not affect the printed copy. It just changes the way you see it on the screen. So for example, I can see that grid lines is checked off. If I was to uncheck that, I would lose my grid lines. It's also where I can, if I want to, I can turn off my formula bar, which I'll get to in just a second. I can also zoom in from here. And let me go back to the top here. I can also apply freeze panes from this menu, which I'll get to towards the end of the video. Over in the Insert menu is where I can insert rows and columns if I need to, and cells. And it's also where I can insert various objects into my spreadsheet, like charts and images. Over here in the Format menu is where I can apply some sort of design theme to my entire spreadsheet or table. I can format numbers to a certain type of number, such as currency or percentages. And I can also apply some simple formatting changes like bold, italic, and underline. In the Data menu is where I can incorporate some tools that will manipulate the data in my table in some way, such as I can sort my data in some order. maybe alphabetically or numerically. I can put a filter onto my data. And if you're interested in sorting and filtering, there's a great Excel video on our YouTube channel that discusses sorting and filtering in Excel. It's also where I can apply a pivot table and build a pivot table. And again, there's a great video on building pivot tables in our YouTube channel. Under the Tools menu, the only one I'll really talk about here is there is a spell check function under here, as well as a dictionary. And let me just move over here to the Help menu, and that's where you can go to seek some help or to get some training in Google Sheets. Now, there is, of course, a formula bar, just like there is in Excel. And remember, this is a great reference point when you have formulas built into your spreadsheet. Because remember, when you have a formula working in your spreadsheet, it's going to show the answer the calculation provides. If you need to know the formula, if you forget how it was constructed, you'll see it up there in the formula bar. And I will point that out later when we get to that point. A couple other things. On the right side, there is that vertical scroll bar that allows you to go up and down through your spreadsheet. And there's also a horizontal scroll bar at the bottom of the screen that allows you to go left and right through your spreadsheet. And then down below here, we have our sheet tabs, which just like Excel allows us to create multiple worksheets in this one file. I simply click on the plus sign and it will add an additional sheet, as many as I need. And I can always rename them to whatever I want by double clicking and then typing in a more specific name. So now that I've provided this general overview of the interface, let's go ahead and just start building a simple spreadsheet. And I'll take you through a series of steps that will show you how to create a great looking spreadsheet. Now in this demonstration, we're going to be organizing our collection of Broadway soundtracks. So in a second, we're going to enter some soundtrack titles into a column. But before we do that, I'd like to give my spreadsheet a unique name. Now remember, whenever you're using a Google app, there's no need to manually save your file like you'd have to do with a computer-based program like Microsoft Excel. Remember to look up here and it says right here, all changes saved in Drive. So when you're using a web-based app such as Google Sheets, every time you change your document or spreadsheet, it's going to be saved automatically into your Google Drive. So all I need to do is come up here to the top left, click on where it says Untitled Spreadsheet, and give it a unique name. And I'll just press Enter to save that title. Now remember, you can use this Move tool here or from your File menu to put it in a specific subfolder in your Google Drive. But for now, I'm just going to save it to the main folder, and then I can always move it later on. So now that I've given it a title, I can go ahead and start putting in those soundtrack titles. So let's start entering some data. Now remember, all you have to do is click on a cell and start typing. Alternatively, you could use your keyboard to go up and down and left and right through the spreadsheet. Remember that your Enter key will go down a column. The Tab key will go to the right, across a row. So I'll start here in A1 and I'll put in my first title. Then I'll press Enter to go down to A2. Notice how I'm just typing in the title, pressing Enter, and then typing again. And I press enter after that last one just to make sure it saves in there. So we've entered our soundtrack titles into column A, but perhaps a better way to organize our data is to alphabetize these titles. So when we're using a spreadsheet program like Google Sheets, what we're doing is we are sorting our data. So let's go ahead and sort our data. The first thing we need to do is indicate which cells contain the values that we want to sort. So I'm going to click on A1 here. I'm going to find the arrow, and I'm going to select the range of cells whose values I want to sort. So that's going to be A1 through A10. Now that I've indicated my range, I can go ahead and sort them, and more specifically, alphabetize them A to Z. So for that, we're going to go to the data menu. And you'll see a couple options here, sort sheet and sort range. Now, since we indicated a specific range, we're going to stick to sort range. And we want A to Z, so I'm going to click on sort range by column A to Z. And there we go. Now, one little problem here. You may notice that one of these titles is technically out of order. And I'm looking at cell A8 right here that says The Music Man. Typically when we alphabetize titles like this, or anything else really, we ignore articles like the, and we alphabetize by the proper noun, which in this case would be music. Now Google Sheets nor Microsoft Excel recognize that rule. So it situated the Music Man by the T rather than the M. So one thing I might want to do, I'm going to double click on this cell so I can edit it. And I will display the title like this, Music Man, comma, the. And I'll press enter to save it that way. Now the last thing is just to resort it. So again, I'll select my range, go to the data menu, go to sort range by column A to Z. And there we go. Now it's properly alphabetized. Now, let's say I want to give each of these titles a unique item ID number. And I want that item ID number to show up to the left of each title. Now, of course, the problem I have is that I don't have an available column to the left of column A. So in order to get that column, we need to insert a new column. With Google Sheets, it's very simple. I'm going to go up to the Insert menu since we're inserting a column. And you'll see a few options for rows, columns, and cells. I'm going to go to Column. And since I want it to be to the left of column A, I'm going to click on column left. Now, before I do that, just take note that I've already set up my cell in column A. So that's the first step. Just make sure that you select any cell in column A. That way, the program knows where to put the new column. So I want it to be to the left, so I'll click on column left. And now I have a new column A. Now that I have an available column, I'm going to start putting in those item ID numbers. So right now, A1 is my active cell, and I'm just going to type in an item ID like this, 00-1, and then I'll just press enter to save that in there. Now, as I go down, each of these is just going to be a consecutive number, 00-1, 00-2, -3, etc. Now, I don't have to enter each of these manually. I can actually use that autofill handle to do it for me. However, sometimes we need to enter more than one value in order for the spreadsheet program to pick up on the pattern. So what I have to do here is put in one more value, 00-2, and then I'll press enter. Now, in order to indicate the pattern, I'm going to first select both of those values, A1 through A2. Now that I've selected both, I can go to my fill handle, and what we're doing is we're going to fill in a series. So I'm just going to click and drag down to cell A10. I'll let go, and now it's filled in the pattern for me, 1 through 10. Now that I've entered all these data values, now might be a good time to start putting in some column labels. Remember, when we're putting in values to a spreadsheet, it's generally a good idea to have some identifying labels above them so you know what each value refers to. So the first thing I'm going to do is just click outside of this highlighted range just to get rid of that highlight. And what I need to do is, to get column labels, I'll have to insert a new row above row 1, just like we inserted that column before. So in this case, the row is going to go above row 1. So I'm going to select any cell in row 1. And as you can see, I've already selected B1, so that's just fine. Now I'm going to go to the Insert menu, and you'll see row above. I'll click on that, and now I have a new row 1. Now that I have this empty row, I can go ahead and put in some column labels. Now I'm going to be filling in some additional labels, and then after I put in those labels, we're going to be filling it in with some more data values. So just watch what I do here. I'll start with A1. My first label will be item ID. Now I'll click in B1, and this one will be title. And remember, you could also use the tab key to go to the right. This one's going to be quantity. In D1, we have cost per title. In E1, we have subtotal. In F1, we have tax. And in G1, we have total cost. And I'll press tab to save that in there. Now, one thing I like to do with column labels, and this is generally a good rule, is to format my column labels so that they stand out from the rest of my data, just so I can easily identify them as labels and not actual data values. So the first thing I'll do is select the range of labels, A1 through G1. So one thing I like to do is put them in a bold font. So I'll come up here to my toolbar and click on the B for bold. Remember, that's also available here in the Format menu. Now, while I'm in this Format menu, I'm going to come down here to Align, and I'm going to click Align Center and center those labels as well. So again, we just put those labels in bold font and center them just to more easily identify them as labels and distinguish them from values. Now, one more thing I want to do before I start inputting those data values is to give my spreadsheet a title, and I want that title to be in the spreadsheet itself. So if I want that title above my actual spreadsheet, I need, again, a new row. So we're going to be inserting a new row above row 1. So again, I'm going to click any cell in row 1. Maybe I'll click C1 this time. I'm going to go up to the Insert menu and then select row above. Now I have a new row 1. Now we have one little problem. If I want to center my title above my spreadsheet, it's going to be very hard because I have a number of cells that are all in the way, and there would be no way to really center this perfectly. So what I need to do is merge my cells into one big cell, and then within that big cell, I can center my text. So when we merge cells, the first step is to indicate which cells we want to merge. So I'm going to click on A1, and I'm going to select A1 through G1. And now I'm going to go up to the Format menu. And in the Format menu, you'll see an option for Merge Cells. And here, I'll click Merge All. And as you can see, by that long blue outline across, I've merged cells A1 through G1, and it's giving me one big cell. Now I'm going to just double click inside that cell, and as you notice, when it merges the cells, it also does another thing. It also centers the alignment automatically, so I don't have to do that myself. Now that it's merged and centered, I can put in my title. And then I'll press enter to save that in there. Now, just like I did with my column labels, I might want to draw a little more emphasis to the title. So I'm going to click on that cell again. And one thing I might want to do is increase the font size. So I'll come up here to this toolbar where it says 10. I'll click on the drop down and change it to 14. And then maybe I want to give it a different font type. So I'll go to the font type menu here. And I'll choose one of these fonts. Again, just to kind of offset it from the rest of my spreadsheet. Now I'm going to go ahead and input my data values for columns C and column D, quantity and cost per title. The remaining columns, subtotal, tax, and total costs, will be determined by a series of formulas. So I'll begin with cell C3 here. Remember, I just simply click in the cell, type in my value, and press enter to go down to the next cell in the same column. Okay, now that I have those data values set up, I'm going to go ahead and enter some formulas to calculate my remaining columns. So my first column is column E, which says subtotal. So in this case, the mathematical operation we'll be using is multiplication, because I'm going to be multiplying my quantity by my cost per title. So the first thing I'll do is click on the cell where I want the answer to go, which is E3. Now, in this case, we're going to be just constructing the formula syntax manually. Remember, there are a number of different formulas and functions, and in Google Sheets, you can find them in your toolbar in this menu here. There are some popular ones here, and then a whole lot of others arranged by type. But again, In this case, it's a rather simple formula, so we're just going to enter it manually. So the first thing we need, if you remember, let me just click to get rid of this menu. There we go. I'm going to double click back in cell E3 here. If you remember, the first thing we need for formula is the equal sign. Now I need to indicate the first cell reference I want to use in my formula, which in this case is C3. So I can either type in C3 or just click on it. Now I need to indicate the mathematical operation, which is multiplication. And that's going to be the asterisk symbol. My next cell reference is going to be D3. So I'm just going to click on D3. And now that I've constructed the formula, I just press enter on my keyboard, and there's my answer. Now, just like we saw with the series over here under item ID, we don't need to construct the formula for each data range. We can apply this formula to the rest of our data ranges using the autofill handle. So now we're going to do that. First thing I'm going to do is click on cell E3 where my formula is. And just to point out to you, remember, this is the answer the formula is providing. But if I forget how the formula is constructed, all I need to do is look up in my formula bar, and there it is. So let's come back over here to E3. Now I'm going to apply this formula to the rest of my data. So I'm going to go to the bottom right corner, find the black plus sign for the fill handle, click, hold, and drag down to E12 and let go. Now I've just applied that formula to the rest of my soundtrack titles. So now we can move on to column F. And that first answer is going to go in cell F3. Again, we're going to be filling this in manually. So the first thing I need is an equal sign. Now, in this case, it's a little different because we're using tax, and the tax is going to be a fixed value. So we're going to have a mixture of a cell reference and a fixed value in our equation. So first I'll put in my cell reference, which is going to be my subtotal. So that's going to be E3. The mathematical operation, again, is multiplication. That's the asterisk symbol. And let's say our tax is 7%. You can either type it in as a decimal, 0.07, or just type it in as a percentage, so 7%. Now our formula is constructed. I can press the enter key, and there's my tax based on the subtotal. So again, I don't need to type out that formula for each data range. I can just apply it using the fill handle. So I'm going to click on cell F3 where the formula is, find the fill handle in the bottom right, click, hold, and drag down to F12 and let go. And now I have my tax for each title. Now we can move on to our final column, column G, for total cost. And that first answer is going to go in G3, so that's where I'll click. Now, this time, we're using a different mathematical operation. In this case, we're just going to be adding our subtotal to our tax. So we could do this in one of two ways. I could type it in manually. I could also use the sum function. And I'll do it in both ways. First, I'll do it manually like we've done before. So I'll press the enter key. My first cell reference is going to be E3. I'll put in the plus sign. And then my next cell reference of F3. And then press enter. And there's my total cost. Now let me quickly undo that to show you the other way. If I use the sum function, the first thing I need to do when I use a function like this is select the values that I want to include in that formula. So that's going to be E3 and F3. So I'm going to select E3 to F3. Now, you might remember that when we use Excel, typically we also include the empty cell after where we want the answer to go. In Google Sheets, it's a little different. Google Sheets is going to figure that out for you. So all you're including in your range selection are the values that you want in your formula, no empty cells. So now that I've selected my values, I can come up here. I'll click on the drop down just to make sure, and I'll click on sum. And as you can see, it's just displaying the syntax here. And then I can just press enter, and there's my answer. And again, I'll apply that formula to the rest of my titles using the fill handle. And there we have it. Okay, now that we have all the formulas done and all the answers in there, one thing I might want to do real quick is format some of these numbers to a currency format. Because what we're dealing with in this spreadsheet is mostly currency values. And we're going to get that from that format menu in just a second. Now, before I do that, first thing I need to do, as usual, is select the range of cells upon which I want to format into that currency value. So I'm going to start here with D3. And there's my arrow for selecting. And I'll just click and drag only the values I want to format into a currency format. Now that I've selected my range D3 through G12, I'm going to come up here to the format menu. And you'll see an option for number, and then a bunch of different formatting options. And in this case, I want currency. There's currency rounded, but that's going to get rid of the decimal. So I want to keep that. So I'm going to click on regular currency here. And you'll notice that it gave me dollar symbols and also rounded everything up or down to just 2 decimal points. So this spreadsheet is just about done, but I'm looking at this spreadsheet and maybe I want to leave myself a little note, or maybe for somebody else. So for example, I'm looking at this information here and I see that the Chicago soundtrack did not sell at all. So maybe I want to leave a little note for future reference. So what Google Sheets allows you to do, just like Excel does, it allows you to leave some sort of note about a specific cell value. And the first thing we do to get to that is to just click on the cell we want to leave a note on. So I'm going to click on cell C5, where that 0 is. Now that I've selected that cell, because we're inserting a note, I'm going to go to the Insert menu. Now, this part's a little bit confusing. If you've used Microsoft Excel before, you'll know that this tool is called Comment. You're inserting a comment. Now, down here, I do see an option for comment. However, in Google Sheets, the comment tool is actually for multi-user use or collaborative use. So in other words, if I was to send this spreadsheet, if I was to share it with somebody else or a group of people, this comment tool would be for that. And then everybody could read my comment, leave their own comment and response, and create a comment thread. Now, since this is just a simple note that I want to leave for myself, I'm going to select Note. Okay, so remember, in Excel, it's called a comment. In Sheets, it's called a note. So I'm going to click Note. And I get a little box here that says type here, and I'm just going to type in reduce price. Maybe I want to reduce the price next time so it has a better chance of selling. Now, to save that in there, all I have to do is click outside of it. And you'll notice that when I look back at that cell C5, there's a little black triangle in the upper right corner. And anytime I point at it, I will see the note. Now, unlike Excel, I can't keep the comment showing on the spreadsheet. It's going to hide automatically. However, in a little bit when we go to print, I'll show you how you can keep the notes on the printed copy. So we're just about ready to get this spreadsheet ready for printing. But before we do that, I'd like to show you one more thing, and that is freeze panes. And for this demonstration, I'm going to zoom in on this spreadsheet to get the full effect. Now, one problem that often arises when we have our spreadsheets, especially if they're long, is that we can lose our label data. So let me demonstrate. I'm going to go to my scroll bar and scroll down a bit. Okay, so here we are. Now, what happens is I've lost the labels to which these individual values refer. So I don't know what this 294 refers to. I don't know what this 4197 refers to, etc. So one thing we could do is actually freeze columns and rows. And this is only a display function. So again, this will have no effect on the printed copy. It just affects the way you see it on your screen. So to do that, I'm going to go up here to the View menu. And I'm going to go to where it says Freeze. And in this case, since my column labels are on row 2, I'm going to select 2 rows. Now when I scroll down, my labels and title remain intact. Now, one issue with Google Sheets is that if I want to freeze column B here, for example, to keep my soundtrack titles, it won't actually let me do that because I have a merged cell above it. In other words, I can't break up this merged cell by the column. So let me demonstrate. If I go to View and then Freeze and then go to 2 columns, I get this problem message. So if you wanted to freeze column B, you would have to first temporarily unmerge this cell by clicking on it again, going to Format, going to Merge Cells, and clicking on Unmerge. And then from that point, I can go to View, Freeze, 2 columns, and then it lets me do it, as you can see. Let me just quickly undo that. And remember, with Microsoft Excel, you don't run into that problem. You can freeze rows and columns even if there's a merged cell incorporated. And one last thing here is if I wanted to perhaps freeze a different row. As we saw, there were options for 1 or 2 rows. Let's say I wanted to freeze row 3. I could also click any cell in row 3, go back to the freeze option, and then select up to current row 3. And as you can see, that little bar moves down, and everything 3 and above stays. And now I'm just going to unfreeze everything. No rows. And I'll just zoom back out a bit here. Okay, so now we are ready to get this set up for printing. Now to get our spreadsheet set up for printing, we're going to go to the File menu. And then we're going to go down to the very bottom and click on Print. This takes us to a print preview screen. Now I'm just going to move down these set of options to see what we can do here. First, we see we have a page orientation, landscape or portrait. We're going to leave it at landscape so it prints out horizontally like you see here. Next down is scale, and we could always increase the scale of this. And by that I mean we kind of just zoom in on the spreadsheet. Since mine is a little small, I'm going to increase mine to 125%. So I'll click on custom number, and then it already went to 125 on its own. So it's just a little bigger. Next down is margins. We can change the margin size from here, but we're just going to leave those at normal. Set custom page breaks just allows you to pick and choose what parts of which page are going to print, essentially. Next down is formatting, and this menu will expand. So let me click on this, and we can see two things are already checked off: show grid lines and show notes. So show grid lines, of course, we want to keep that on. If we turn it off, we lose our nice grid lines, and it's harder to read. Show notes is going to print out that note that we added to our spreadsheet. Now with Google Sheets, it's going to, as a default, print out our notes on a separate page. Excel allows you to keep the notes on the same spreadsheet. With Google Sheets, we just have to let it print them out on a separate page like this with little notations. Also notice that notation is in the spreadsheet itself. The page order we can leave alone. Next down is alignment. And this one I always like to change. This will allow us to center it horizontally and vertically. So it's already centered horizontally on the page, but it would look nicer if the spreadsheet was centered vertically as well, this way. So I'm going to click in this drop down and change it to center. And as you can see now, it's centered both horizontally and vertically. Last but not least, I'll move to headers and footers. I'll open this drop down, scroll down a bit. Now I could check off any of these options here, and they'll put these different headers and footers in whatever place is set as a default. Instead, however, I'm going to click on Edit Custom Fields. And as you can see, it gives me these text boxes at the top, or the header position and the footer position. So I'm going to click in the center, and I can either type in something manually or choose from these options here. I'm going to click on title, and I'll click on workbook title because that's actually what I want to call this spreadsheet in the header. So I'll click on that. And now that I've clicked outside of it, it shows the workbook title. Now I'll go down to my footer position. I'll click in the center box, and this time I'll click on the page number option. And it gives you a couple different formats, and I'll choose this one here. Once I click outside of that, it will show page 1. Now I can go up here, click confirm, and you'll notice that the header is on page 2 as well, and also the footer, page 2 for page 2. And now my spreadsheet's ready for printing. All I have to do is come up here and click next. It will take me to the screen here, one more print preview screen, where I can then select my printer and print. And that does it for my demonstration of Google Sheets. I hope you found this video informative, and I encourage you to check out the other videos on Microsoft Excel. Best of luck if you want to try this on your own. Thanks for watching, and take care.